Formula One is seen as the peak of automotive engineering, with aerodynamics, powertrains and construction all being pushed to the absolute limit. Of course, the heart and soul of an F1 car is its engine, and no matter how crazy a road car engine can get, it will get nowhere near the suck, squeeze, bang and blow from the top level of motorsport. In this video, we're going to investigate the dream engine swap, taking an F1 engine and putting it straight into a road car. Yes, we've had the Ferrari F50, the Porsche Carrera GT and a one-off Yamaha that have used engines based on F1 blocks, but they haven't been pure F1 engines taken straight from the racetrack. Of course, we are all waiting with bated breath to see the Mercedes-AMG One hypercar, a car that is supposedly taking the engine straight out of Lewis Hamilton's F1 car. Now, I've personally seen that car testing at a top secret test track in the UK, and it's fair to say it wasn't having the best of times. It's no secret that AMG have been struggling to get the car to work, especially at low speed. And when it drove past me, to be honest, it sounded like a misfiring MotoGP bike. So, what will Mercedes be battling against? Why is it so difficult to put an F1 engine into a road car? Before we get started, guys, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon so you don't miss any Drive Tribe content. First up, they aren't the easiest of things to start. F1 engines can't exactly be classed as turnkey, and that's down to the high tolerances that are engineered into the engine block. The gaps between the moving parts of an F1 engine are minuscule, one of the characteristics that allows them to be so efficient at creating power. The tolerances are so tight that from cold, the pistons are seized within the engine block. Fluid has to be sent at a temperature of around 80 degrees centigrade round the coolant patches of the engine to loosen it up for startup. That means if you want to get up on Sunday for a drive, you'll have to get up mega early to massage that engine into life. And then there's the actual startup. As many of you will know, you need essentially an impact drill to crank an F1 engine into life. That means unless you fit a beast of a starter motor, you're going to need one of those devices in your garage for every time you start up. Next up, cooling. In a normal car, you have a front-mounted radiator that saps heat from the engine and dissipates it to the surroundings. The amount of heat energy that an engine creates is connected to the amount of torque it creates at a specific RPM. Therefore, the high revving nature of an F1 engine means it's going to create a lot of heat that you need to get rid of. If you're going to put an F1 engine into a road car then, I suggest you take the cooling system along with it, seeing as an F1 car uses two huge radiators on either side of the car in side pods. Otherwise, you're going to have to create a custom heat exchanger using a whole host of nasty radiator sizing calculations. That's not going to be pretty. F1 radiators are often mounted at an angle, which means you can fit a nice big radiator into the side pod while keeping frontal area down. Also, F1 cooling systems don't come with cooling fans, which means as you're sitting in traffic stationary, you're almost certainly going to overheat unless you strap two big powerful cooling fans to either radiator. Basically, it's going to be a big job. Number 3, cost. An F1 engine is a top piece of engineering, therefore it commands a top price. A current F1 engine sets a team back around £6.3 million, which means justifying putting such an engine into a road car is going to be seriously difficult. The materials can be ferociously expensive, as well as the tech that they make up. To get a current F1 engine to rev to 15,000 RPM and create about 800 brake horsepower, you have to use tech like a pneumatic valve train. Instead of using a classic spring to close the valve, these engines use pressurized nitrogen to snap the valve shut after being opened by the camshafts. That's not going to be the cheapest tech to maintain or control. Saying that, if you were born during the V10 era, you can go on the internet and find engines like this, a Honda Mugen V10 engine for around £10,000. You can also get a Judd V8 or a Cosworth V8 as fairly budget F1 engines, but you're probably going to have to rebuild them when you first receive them and also find gearboxes for them. But for 10 grand, it seems somewhat doable. Number 4, torque. F1 engines are known for their high horsepower, but not so much for their torque output. Considering an F1 car weighs about 700 kilograms including the driver, they don't need loads of low-down torque to get them off the line. Also, considering the amount of downforce they create, cornering speeds are so high that they can fly out of corners on throttle without much bother at all. That means that F1 engines are designed and tuned for high horsepower, and torque peaks high in the rev range. F1 engines create low torque compared to their horsepower figures due to the short stroke and wide bore of the pistons. That short stroke allows F1 engines to rev much higher than normal road car engines and therefore create more power. But that comparative lack of leverage from each piston leads to a lack of torque. In a normal performance road car weighing anywhere between 1200 and 1800 kilograms, an F1 engine would really have to work hard to trundle around town and generally get the car going. However, these days, a hybrid F1 power unit would have a much better time of it than, say, a naturally aspirated V10 from the 2000s, thanks to turbocharging and electrical assistance, which is essentially used to fill in that torque gap low down in the rev range. AMG has said that its hypercar is going to use its electric motors to trundle around town, so they don't even need to bother with the engine at slow speeds. And finally, lifespan. F1 has changed quite a bit for the 2019 season, with each driver only having 3 engines to last the entire season. That means they need to be made genuinely reliable. Hop back in time, however, and there was an era when an engine would only last 1 race, with it either having to be rebuilt or simply shelved for a completely new engine. The stresses that an F1 engine is subjected to are massive, thanks to the sheer ferocity of combustion and the speed of reciprocation. An unlimited F1 V10 from this side of the millennium can spin up to 20,000 RPM, which means each piston is travelling up and down 300 times per second. If you take into account the mass of the piston can experience 10,600 G during operation. Cylinder pressures can reach 1500 psi per second, so it's no wonder that F1 engines can be fragile. If you were somehow to get an F1 engine into your road car, you'd be forever taking it apart and rebuilding it just so you could keep it working. You better not be short of time or money. Now, I've been talking about all of this from the perspective of taking an F1 engine and swapping it into a road car. AMG, however, will have built a car around Lewis Hamilton's F1 engine, which is obviously the way forward, but they will still have had to have thought of all of the things that I've mentioned in this video. Then again, sheer cash can solve a lot of problems in the engineering world. So a project like taking a Ferrari F1 V10 and putting it into a LaFerrari could be possible if you were rich and psychotic enough to do so. So how will AMG make this 1.6 litre turbo hybrid powertrain reliable? Have they detuned and remapped it to have more road-based characteristics? We already know that they've reduced the rev limit from 15,000 to 11,000 RPM. How will they manage the amount of heat that it creates? And will it be able to cold start on a regular basis? So then, have they dumbed down the engine to make it more cost effective? And will all of the slow driving be handled by the electric motors, with the F1 engine only firing up when you fancy getting a bit of a lick on? After seeing the car cough past me about a year ago, there are lots of questions, but they are ones I'm sure the guys and girls at AMG can answer. But wow, do they have a mountain to climb. Now, I've got a question for you guys. If you could have one road car and one F1 engine combination, what would it be? For me, it would be a Jaguar CX-75 with a V10 Cosworth engine. That would be the perfect combination for me. But I want to hear from you guys, so comment down below with your car and engine combinations. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.